ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मीलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरुवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूप कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकम्। वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरो श्रीयुतपदकमलं श्रीगुरो वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातं सहगण रघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्ण चैतन्य देवं श्रीराधा कृष्ण पादान् सहगण ललिता श्री विशाखान्वितंश्च हे कृष्ण करुणा सिंधु दीनबंधु जगतपते गोपेश गोपिका कांत राधा कांत नमोस्तुते ताप्त कांचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानो सुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्येव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिव गौर भक्त वृंद हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। नमो विष्णुपादाय कृष्ण प्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्ति वेदांत स्वामिनिति नामिने नमस्ते सारस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे। So this one book, Bhagavad Gita, it is so mystical. Why it is so mystical? Because it contains the knowledge of the entire creation. Whatever is required to be known to perfect the human form of life is very much contained within this one book. It is so mystical. And to what extent it can expand, there is no limit. This one scripture is called Brahma Vidyaya Yoga Shastra. Brahma Vidyaya means the knowledge of the self. What is the self? The self is eternal. It is everlasting. It cannot be destroyed by any means. Very interestingly, I remember one discourse which one of the greatest conquerors on this planet Earth, Mr. Alexander, had. You know Mr. Alexander the Great? People say Alexander the Great. But actually he was not so great. So when he was conquering the entire planet Earth with his mighty army, he came to India also. And in India, because he had a spiritual teacher, Aristotle. Aristotle was his spiritual guide, although he did not give much heed to it. So Aristotle told him that when you go to India, in India there are some sages who are very advanced in spiritual knowledge. So if you get an opportunity, please get some learning from them, get some wisdom from them. And the attention of Alexander was attracted by one sage who was deep in forest in Takshala. So Alexander wanted to meet him. So what he did, he sent his men with very opulent gifts and gave him an invitation, invited him to come and meet him in his camp. He was camping because he was conquering. He was trying to move to the extent he would conquer. So the sage very firmly turned both invitation and the gifts down. and returned his money. And Alexander was infuriated. He could not accept that someone could reject. So he again sent one of his senior persons, one of his army chiefs, to go and meet the sage and request him to come and see the Alexander the Great. But again he was turned down. So finally he became so infuriated that he personally came with all his mighty army, trying to influence the sage. And when he came and met the sage, he was on his horse, and the sage was in meditation. So he asked the sage that, why did you return my gifts? What did the sage say? They were tainted with blood and hatred. So Alexander was taken aback. The next question he said that, do you know who am I? How dare you turn down my invitation? So the sage smiled and said, hardly you know who you are. And Alexander was in complete frustration. So similarly, in our life, we are trying to uh, conquer so many things outside, but inside we are still not clear to who we are and what is the purpose of human life. So this Brahma Vidyaya, this king of all knowledge, Raj Vidya, gives us an opportunity to really know as to who we are. So Bhagavad Gita is one book which gives us the opportunity for yoga. Yoga is not physical exercise. It's not maintaining the body as we normally have assumed. Assume is the right word. Assume. One devotee was very nicely explaining assumption. Assume means making an ass, A-double-S, of ourselves and others. You know an ass? Gadha. Trying to make a fool of ourselves and others. Because yoga means to have communion or connection or correlation with the Supreme, who is also eternal and we are also eternal. So that eternal everlasting connection, how it can be established, that is the goal of human life. So Bhagavad Gita gives us the goal of human life. What is the goal of human life? Is to become immortal. Is to come to the platform of realization that we are not mortal. We are eternal. And Bhagavad Gita also gives us the process, the sadhana. It is both the sadhya, that is the goal. It gives us the goal. It removes bewilderment and gives us clarity. You see, in most of our uh, endeavors, we are always faced with bewilderment. We are always faced with confusion. So Bhagavad Gita removes confusion by removing the misconceptions. What is the greatest misconception? We do not know who we are. May I ask you, what's your name? Yeah. Again, a little louder, please. Shaunadeep Bose, Mr. Bose. So Mr. Bose, who are you? If I may ask, what is your understanding? Difficult question, huh? आपके बगल में कौन है? आप क्या नाम है आपका? सचिन? Yes, Sachin ji. May I ask you, what is your identity? What is your identity? Is your identity? Uh, Little louder. What do you do for society? Okay, let me ask you, what are you doing for society? Are we actually doing anything for society, or is the society doing everything for us? Still not clear. What's your name? पंकज. आपका क्या कहना है? आप कौन है? आपकी क्या पहचान है? हाँ, सोसाइटी पहचान है. ह्यूमन सोसाइटी, ह्यूमन फॉर्म ऑफ लाइफ में तो है. एनीवन फ्रॉम ऑनलाइन. व्हाट इज आवर आइडेंटिटी? Who we are? One who is knowledgeable, one who is learned, he inquires. ये क्वेश्चन हमारे कॉन्शियसनेस में कभी आता है? नहीं आता. Because it requires a certain level of advancement. Khushi. Okay, nice name, Khushi. Khushi is saying we are soul. Then the question comes, what is the characteristics of a soul? Are we living at the platform of soul? Are we performing activities at the platform of soul? Yes. So Bhagavad Gita teaches us how we can come to the platform of soul and how we can perform activities which can lead us to realize that we are soul, and those activities which can make us happy because it connects with the super soul, and that is called bhakti. So yoga means connection or communion or establishment of our co-relation with the Supreme Lord. So that is through the means of bhakti. The process is very powerful. It is empowered by Krishna. So Krishna empowers the process in Bhagavad Gita and he gives the process of Bhakti Yoga. So we are discussing the first chapter. So far we have covered 3 sessions on this and first 12 verses have been discussed. The first verse talks about the doubts of Dhritarashtra. So first chapter is the foundation of Bhagavad Gita. It lays down the situation, the circumstances in which Bhagavad Gita was spoken because of Dhritarashtra's doubt. He was not clear. He had this fear in his heart that because his son were irreligious, there is very little hope that they will win. But still, a person who is attached to his own opinions, to worldly comforts and pleasure, even if he knows what is inevitable, you know what is inevitable, जो पता है कि होगा लेकिन उसको स्वीकार नहीं करता. He fails to accept. So that is the nature of a person who is blind. So not only Dhritarashtra is blind, everyone in Kali Yuga is blind. Why? Because what is inevitable, that the body will die. Do we all know or do not know? We all know. But still, like Dhritarashtra, we have so much hope against hope. And we have our own shares of attachment. So which does not allow us to accept the reality. So that is the first lesson. Attachments. Attachments are one of the biggest impediments in our advancement of spiritual path. And the biggest attachment in today's world is one's own opinion. There is no bigger impediment than one's own opinion, one's own ideas, one's own plans, one's own agenda. The attachments are compared to anchors. Anchors समझते हैं? When there is a boat on the river, if you have to make the boat move, what you have to release? The anchor. Anchor को हिंदी में क्या बोलते हैं? Langar. Yes, langar. You have to remove the langar. And the biggest langar is our own ideas, our own opinions, which does not allow us to go beyond the blindness that we are deep settled in. So the first verse was on Dhritarashtra. And then we saw the diplomacy of Duryodhana. From second verse till 12th verse, the second section was that how Duryodhana, he misrepresents or he manipulates So that is all we do. When we are in difficult situation, we do not accept our own faults. But we try to shift the fault, the blame on others and try to manage the situation in some way so that we can get our work done or we can have success. Very dangerous. So we will continue from the 13th verse. So we saw in this section, in the second section, that how Duryodhana is boasting, how he is trying to boast to his teacher, who is Dronacharya, and also to grandfather Bhishma, that those who have assembled on his side, they are all willing to give up their lives so that he can become successful. So we saw in the 12th verse. आपके पास है गीता ना? आप लोग देख सकते हैं. First chapter, 12th verse. I am just recapping from the 12th verse. So when Duryodhana approached his teacher Drona and he held Drona responsible for the formidable army which was opposed by the Pandavas. And then he approached Bhishma because these are the foremost formidable warriors. His hope is on these two generals, that if they fight to their best of their ability, then there is any hope that Duryodhana can win. So in our life also we have hope against hope. We are thinking that our friends, our family members, or maybe our material possessions, when opposition will come, when difficult time will come, they will help us and we will be able to win over. That will never happen. That will never happen. Deha patra kalatradishu atma sainyashu asatsu api. Tesham pramatta nidhanam pashyanapi na pashye. So deha means this body. Apatya. Apatya and kalatra means wife and children. Adishu means so on, so forth. They are Atma Sainyashu. Atma Sanyu. Atma means the self and Shanyashu means those who are the soldiers. What does the soldier do? They protect. So everyone in this world is thinking that my body, myself, and those who are related to my body, they are my soulmate, or they are the one who will save me. But has anyone been saved from the onslaught of death by any of his relative? Is it possible? Can any relative accompany or can any relative swap? So, Atma Sanyashu Asatsu api. Tesham Pramatta Nidhanam, and the entire life is lost in trying to foster this relationship. And one becomes completely intoxicated. Pramatta means intoxicated. Such a person, Pashyan api na Pashyan. So Bhagavad Gita removes the blindness, the misconception that we have in our heart and also in our vision, and gives us the clarity, the reality. So we see the same was having in the heart of Duryodhana and Dhritarashtra. They were not accepting the reality. Now, what is the reality? That on the opposite side, there is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Shri Krishna. To such an extent that when Duryodhana was mentioning the names of the formidable captains, he even did not mention Krishna. So similarly, in our life also, unless and until we become a devotee of substance, then we do not have Krishna in our life. And if we do not have Krishna in our life, everything else, none of it will work. So because Duryodhana was very depressed, so the grandfather Bhishma, just in order to encourage him, he blew his mighty conch shell. His conch shell was so uproarious, it was like a roar of a lion. And what was the purpose? To give some joy in the heart of depressed Duryodhana. But Srila Prabhupada speaks in the purport. Srila Prabhupada says that this blowing of the conch shell, it was an indication by Bhishmadev to Duryodhana that actually he has no scope for victory. Prabhupada says, he informed his depressed grandson Duryodhana that he had no chance of victory in the battle because the Supreme Lord Krishna was on the other side. So in our life, if we have Krishna in our side, the battle is already won. We don't have to worry for anything else, irrespective of whatever this world may say or seem. We should not be misguided, or we should not be distracted by this fact. So after the conch shell of Bhishmadev was blown, then there was series of conch shells which were blown, and that we will see from the next verse, which is the 13th verse. So these are the third section. This is the third section of the first chapter. As I mentioned before, the first chapter is divided in two sections. Anyone remembers what are the two main sections of the first chapter? Most of you are in the, video is off. Very few video is on. Anyway, up to you. What is that two divisions of the first chapter? The first division is called observing the armies on the battlefield. That is from first verse till 27th. And the next section is called Arjuna's lamentation or Arjuna Vishadi. So the first 27 verses is observing the armies. So what happened on the battlefield after there was the blowing of the conch shell of Bhishmadev? There were other warriors who blew their conch shell. And the blowing of the conch shell is the display of the chivalry, of the spirit that which they have come to fight. This is 13th verse. Tata Shankarscha Bhairyascha Panavana Gagomukha Saseva Vihanyanta Sasabdashtumlo Abhavat. So after the conch shell of Bhishmadev was blown, and the conch shells, drums, bugles, trumpets, and horns were all certainly sounded, and the combined sound was tumultuous. So previously, when there was this war, and the war was won not on weapon, but because of the prowess of men, the fighters. And with them, they used to be having all this paraphernalia just to boost the spirit, just to make them remain in the spirit of chivalry to fight to the best of their ability. So all these trumpets and bugles and horns, they were all blown. And in the midst of all this, there were two very extraordinary personalities. 14th verse. Tatha shveter hayer yukte mahati sandane sthito madhava pandavasteva divyo shankho pradadmato. So tatha shveter hayer yukte. Shveter is white and hayer is horses. So there was a very special chariot which was drawn by the white horses. And who was seated on this chariot is Madhava. Madhava is another name of Krishna. You will see in the commentary Srila Prabhupada will speak. Madhava means one who is the husband of the goddess of fortune. And the other is Pandava. And amongst the formidable Pandava is Arjuna. So Krishna and Arjuna are seated on this very special chariot. This chariot is gifted by whom? Yes, Agnidev. And what is the speciality of this chariot? No, it can conquer in all directions. It can simultaneously conquer in all directions. And what they did, uh, Divya Shankha Pradatmato, they blew their conch shell, but their conch shell was not ordinary conch shells. They were not in the category of the conch shell blown by other warriors because their conch shells were Divya. Divya means transcendental. When Bhishma Dev blew his conch shell, Vyasadeva is saying it was not Divya. But both the conch shells blown by Krishna, of course, we can understand. Krishna says, Jan Karna Chame Divya. Everything Krishna is transcendental. But here it is saying that Divya Shankar Pradad Matau. Pradad Matau means it is plural. It is being referred to both for Krishna and also for Arjuna. So on the other side, both Lord Krishna and Arjuna stationed on the great chariot, drawn by white horses, sounded their transcendental conch shells. So the conch shells of both these personalities, Arjuna and Krishna, are not ordinary. They are transcendental. Let us see what Srila Prabhupada explains in the purport. Prabhupada says, in contrast with the conch shell blown by Bhishma Dev, the conch shell in the hands of Krishna and Arjuna are described as transcendental. Why? Of course, we understand that Krishna's conch shell is transcendental. How come Arjuna's conch shell has become transcendental? When it is being said here in the purport through Srila Prabhupada that Bhishma Dev also, sounded his conch shell, but that conch shell is not transcendental. समझ रहे हैं आप लोग क्या डिस्कस कर रहे हैं? ट्रांससेंडेंटल समझ रहे हैं ना? बहुत विशेष है जिसके अंदर एक दिव्य ध्वनि थी. So is Arjuna a bigger warrior, a mightier warrior as compared to Bhishma Dev? What is the comparison of Arjuna if he is compared with Bhishma Dev? Huh? Here it is being said that the conch shell blown by Bhishma is ordinary, whereas the conch shell which was blown by Arjuna is extraordinary. What makes Arjuna's conch shell becomes extraordinary transcendental? And what makes Bhishma Dev conch shell remain ordinary and not become transcendental? Dinesh, you have rare appearance.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Prabhuji, Arjuna was on the Arjuna was the pure devotee of Lord Krishna, Prabhuji.
Acha, Bhishma Dev was an impure devotee.
Not an impure devotee, Prabhuji.
Then, if you are going by that criteria, then Bhishma Dev's counsel should be transcendental. Think properly. Pranab Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
I think because it is.
If you think that means you are speculating.
It is blown for the good cause because as per the direction of Lord Krishna.
It is good cause. There are two types of speculation. One is called mental speculation, which is very dangerous. And the other is called philosophical speculation, which is still accepted. You understand what is the difference between both? Philosophical speculation and mental speculation.
No,
So,
Prabhuji.
philosophical speculation to some extent is still permitted, but mental speculation is not. Philosophical speculation means based on what is given in the scriptures, what you have read or heard. And mental speculation is from your own side, which is coming purely from our impure mind. I want you all to think a little more deeper, dive into the scenario. Just think that you are also on the battlefield. Not only Arjuna and Bhishma are on the battlefield, you are also on the battlefield. You are hearing the sounds of the conch shells. The sound which was echoed by Bhishma Dev is not transcendental. Whereas the sound which was echoed by Arjuna and Krishna are both transcendental. So what makes Arjuna's conch shell become transcendental, whereas Bhishma Dev's conch shell is not transcendental? Yes, Suman.
Krishna Prabhuji. Prabhuji, Arjuna's console blown along with Krishna's console so that it produced transcendental sound. But Bhishma Dev blown his console separately.
Come again, not very clear.
Prabhuji, Arjuna's console blown along with Krishna's console, so it produced a transcendental sound.
No, it was not that they both, they both had some synchronization. And because of the synchronization, Arjuna's conch shell became transcendental. No. You have to think a little more deeper. Why Arjuna's conch shell is considered transcendental, whereas Bhishma's is not? It's a very important aspect of our learning. Any one of you want to try? Dineshji, you want to try? Yes, Yagnesh? That is true, but that is not the complete answer. Then the conch shells of Yudhishthira should also be transcendental. That is not so. We will see in the next verses. Then of Bhima should also be transcendental because they are all on the sides of Arjuna, Krishna. Why only these two? Of course, Krishna's conch shell is transcendental. Only Arjuna's conch shell is considered to be transcendental. Why Bhishma Dev is not a pure devotee? Yudhishthir Maharaj is not a pure devotee. Very important understanding. Because Arjuna gave up his own ideas, his own plans of fighting. He was not willing to fight. But because he fought only for the purpose of giving joy to Krishna. So his conch shell is transcendental. Whereas Bhishma Dev was not fighting for the pleasure of Krishna. So his conch shell is ordinary. So any activity which we perform for the pleasure of Krishna, according to the instruction of Krishna, it has a transcendental effect. So many times I am repeating this experience that you had last Saturday. Last Saturday was what? Nirjala Ekadashi. Most of us fasted and we could easily do that. Why? Because there was the transcendental effect. Can we not feel the transcendental effect? Can we do it again? Not be easy. Not be easy. Very difficult. Because that empowerment was not there. So transcendental, any activity which is done exclusively for the purpose of the pleasure of the Lord or for the service of the Lord, it has a transcendental effect. Prabhupada's literature are all transcendental. Why? Because they are all prepared and produced to give joy to Krishna, to give joy to his spiritual master. There is not a tinge of any selfish motive. Whereas in Bhishma Dev, why was he fighting? Because he had his own selfish motive. He was very much dedicated to keep his vow. He did not think of Krishna's plan. He did not think of Krishna's pleasure. He was still addicted, or he was still attached to his own vows. So even in our practice of Krishna consciousness, if we have our own ideas, if we have our own agendas, or if we have our own pleasures, then the activity may be fully spiritual, but the effect will not be there. It will not be transcendental. So Prabhupada is saying the sounding of the transcendental conch shells indicated that there was no hope of victory on the other side because Krishna was on the side of the Pandavas. And Jayastu Pandu Putranam Yesham Pakshe Janardana. Victory is always with person like the sons of Pandu because Lord Krishna is associated with them. Lord Krishna is associated with them means that these Pandavas, they are willing to sacrifice everything for the purpose of God. And whenever and wherever the Lord is present, the goddess of fortune is also there because the goddess of fortune never lives alone without her husband. So we always worship Lakshmi Narayan, Sita Ram, Radha Krishna. So the internal energy, the goddess of fortune is always there. So we should never ever worry. That is a big, confirmation to all the practitioners. That if we are on the side of Krishna, then we need not have any worry, or we should not have any fear, because ultimately we will be victorious. Why? Because we are on the side of Krishna. If we are in Krishna's party, then victory, fortune, and success is sure. Therefore, victory and fortune were awaiting Arjuna. Why only Arjuna? It is awaiting every devotee, as indicated by the transcendental sound produced by the conch shells of Vishnu or Lord Krishna. Besides that, the chariot on which both the friends were seated had been donated by Agni. And this indicated that this chariot, yeah, it is mentioned here. I did not read the purport. The chariot was capable of conquering all sides, wherever it was drawn over the three worlds. So what are the names of this transcendental conch shells? And what is so very special about it? That is the next verse, 15th verse. Let's see the 15th verse. Please try to hear. Initially, it may not sound very, adventurous, very attractive, but gradually you'll be able to get a grasp of it. Panchajanyam Rishikesho Devadattam Dhananjaya Pondram Dadmo Mahashankha Bhimakarma Vrakodara. So the name of the conch shell which was blown by Krishna is Panchajanya. There is a big history about it, that there was a demon called Panchajanya who used to reside in the conch shell. And Krishna killed him. And he received this conch. And it became a personal paraphernalia of the Supreme Lord. But Srila Prabhupada gives the purport in a different way. He says that Lord Krishna is referred to as Rishikesha. Panchajanyam Rishikesha. And Devadatta Dhananjaya. So the mention of Lord Krishna's name as Rishikesha in this verse because he is the owner of all senses. So far we hear that he is the master of all senses. Not just the master or the controller, but he is the owner of all senses. Rishika means the senses, and Isha means the owner or controller. So Krishna is the Isha. Isha Vashyam Idam Sarvam. The Supreme Lord is the owner and proprietor of everything, both in this material and also in the spiritual world. The living entities are part and parcel of him, and therefore the senses of the living entities are also part and parcel of his senses in the purified state. When there is communion, when there is correlation, when there is connection. The impersonalists cannot account for the senses of the living entities, and therefore they are always anxious to describe all living entities as senseless or impersonal. The Lord situated in the heart of all living entities directs their senses. But he directs in terms of the surrender of the living entity. And in the case of a pure devotee, he directly controls the senses. But this condition is only applicable, as I said, in the scenario when one is a fully surrender, a pure soul. What does pure mean? That to the extent one is surrendered to Krishna, to that extent one is pure. And to what extent one is impure, it is not externally. It is internally based on one's submission and surrender. To the extent one lacks surrender, he remains impure. He may, pose himself whatever, clean shave, head shave, saffron, or he may be having a sannyasi wish. But that is not what is being told here. So the senses will be controlled by the Supreme Lord to the extent one is surrendered. And who are not surrendered, who controls? Maya, through the agency of karma. Everyone is forced to act helplessly. In the third chapter, we will see, according to the qualities he has acquired from the modes of material nature. But when one becomes a devotee, one is not helpless. Why? Because he is always being held. And who is helping? Krishna as the Paramatma, the super soul in the heart. Prabhupada says, the Lord situated in the heart of all living entity directs their senses. But he directs in terms of the surrender of the living entity. And in the case of a pure devotee, he directly controls the senses. Here on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, the Lord directly controls the transcendental senses of Arjuna. So Arjuna's senses have also become transcendental. Not only Arjuna's conch shell was transcendental, Arjuna's senses have also become transcendental. Why? Because they are being used in Krishna's service. Sarvopadir vinurmuktam tatparatvena nirmalam rishikena rishikesha sevanam bhakti ruchyate. So as we engage our senses, our mind, our intelligence in Krishna's service, to that extent, the senses, the mind, the intelligence becomes purified. And it has a transcendental effect. The Lord, yeah. And thus his particular name of Rishikesha. So this aspiration should be there, that we do not want our senses to control us. Everyone else is a slave of his sense. Whatever the senses and the mind demand, one is helplessly trying to serve the senses. That is why it is called Godas. But one can become a Goswami. How? See, try to understand. One cannot become a Goswami on his own. Because the only Swami of the senses is the Supreme Lord Krishna. So as one serves Krishna, Krishna controls the senses. So to be able to get rid of lust, greed, anger, all the 6 vices is not possible by any human effort. Can you go to the doctor and tell him that you please cure me of my anger? Can any doctor do that? आपको क्रोध से निजात दिला सकता है कोई डॉक्टर, कोई साइंटिस्ट दिला सकता है? नहीं दिला सकता. Why? Because the mind and senses cannot be controlled by any human effort. Why? Because they do not belong to us. They belong to the Supreme. To the extent they are engaged in service of Supreme, the Supreme controls them. So it's a very important lesson of learning that through the process of sadhana bhakti, what we are trying to have sense control. We are trying to regulate our senses. But it will be only possible to the extent we engage these senses in Krishna's service. To that extent, Krishna will control them. And it will become regulated or controlled. Otherwise, it is not possible. Otherwise, we see people are trying externally regulation. They practice for years, and one day, one instance or one moment, all the control, all the regulation, it all slips. Why? Because the protection is not coming from Krishna. So the Lord's name is Rishikesha. He only controls the mind and senses of his surrendered devotee. Not everyone. The Lord has different names according to different activities. For example, the name is Madhusudana because he killed the demon of the name Madhu. His name is Govinda because he gives pleasure to the cows and to the senses. Go also means cows and go also means senses. So Govinda means one who gives pleasure to the senses. So as we engage, today is also the appearance day of Srila Bhakrishna Pandit, one of the very close associates of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So he used to perform dancing, the transcendental dancing. For how many hours? 72 hours non-stop. What was the purpose? It was to please the Lord. Today I had a class in the morning and I was discussing how he got so much of strength, ability and energy to be able to continually dance in the same aesthetic mood for 72 hours because he was situated in his constitutional position. And his mind and his senses, his body was being controlled by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself entered into his heart and made him dance. And outside, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was relishing his dancing. So to the extent we engage, and how we will engage? When we are agreeing. First thing is to agree. It is not to resist. Then we can be used as an instrument. So Arjuna was being used as an instrument on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. Why? Because Krishna was controlling his mind and senses. But to the extent we are not submissive, we are not surrendered, Maya will control our mind and senses. And we will continue to rot in the cycle of birth and death. So Prabhupada is mentioning his names, various names of Krishna. Every name has a significance of the function that Krishna performs. He is called Madhusudana because he slays the demon named Madhu. He is called Govinda because he gives pleasure to both the senses and to the cow. His name is Vasudev because he appeared as the son of Vasudev. And his name is Devaki Nandan because he accepted Devaki as his mother. So in this way, Krishna has so many names. And each name, there is a special relationship with his devotee. That relationship is prefixed before his name. His name is Devaki Nandan or Yashoda Nandan. Prabhupada says his name is Yashoda Nandan because he avoided his childhood pastime. So similarly, his name is Rishikesh because he gave direction to Arjuna on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. So Krishna is willing to become the charioteer of each and every one of us. Krishna is willing to give us direction to each one of us, provided we accept his direction coming. And where is his direction? His direction is clearly in Bhagavad Gita. So if we accept the teachings of Bhagavad Gita, so Krishna will control our mind and senses. What are our mind and senses compared to? It is compared to the horses on the chariot. So Krishna will take charge and control. And Arjuna is referred to as Dhananjay in this verse because he helped his elder brother in fetching wealth when it is required. And Bhima is Vakrodara. Vrika is fire. In Udara means the belly. So according to the fire in the belly, one has appetite. That is why you see some people eat very less. They are satisfied. Some people eat more, but still they are not satisfied. Why? It depends on the vrika, the fire in the belly. Because fire in the belly also means the digestion, the digestive capacity. So Arjuna was a voracious eater. Prabhupada writes in this. Yeah, Prabhupada says it. Because he could eat as voraciously. And he could perform Herculean tasks such as killing the demons. So Bhima also blew his conch shell, Arjuna blew his conch shell, and all the Pandavas, they blew the conch shells. So Prabhupada is saying that because Krishna was on the side of the Pandavas, so they were predestined to win, whereas the Kauravas were predestined to lose. That was the message announced by the sounds of the conch shells. And what are the name of the conch shells of the other Pandavas? That is in the next two verses, three verses, 16 to 18. Ananta Vijayam Raja Kunti Putro Yudhishthara Nakula Sahadevascha Subhosho Manipushpako Kashyascha Parameshvasha Shikhandi cha Maharatha Drishtadimno Viratascha Satyakischa Aparijita Drupado Draupadeyascha Sarvasha Prithvipate Saubhadrascha Mahabahu Shankham Dadmo Prithak Prithak. So there's a long list of what happened. So it all triggered with the conch shell being blown by Bhishma Dev. And then there was an array of the conch shells being blown from the both sides, from the both parties. So King Yudhishthira, the son of Kunti, blew his conch shell. His conch shell was Ananta Vijay. Ananta Vijay means that there is no limit to his success or victory. And Nakul and Sahadev blew the Swaghosh and Mani Pushpako. What is the name of Bhima's conch shell? Very good. Conradar. And what is the name of Arjuna's conch shell? There are many on the online also. Without having a look, how much you are hearing? What is the name of Arjuna's conch shell?
प्रभु जी पांचजन्य
Panchajanya is Arjuna's conch shell.
Devdatta.
कृष्णास कृष्ण
Arjuna is Devdatta.
Huh? Arjuna's is Devadatta. I think Devadatta had joined. Devadatta is there. Huh? So your name, the origin of your name comes from the conch shell of Arjuna. It's a spiritual name, Devadatta. So the great archer, the king of Kashi, the great fighter Shikhandi, Drishtadumna, Virata, and unconquerable Satyaki, Drupada, the sons of Draupadi, and others, O kings, such as the mighty armed son of Sobhadra. Who is the mighty armed son of Sobhadra? Abhimanyu. All blew their respective conch shells. Arjuna is also known as mighty armed. What is the Sanskrit word? Mahabaho. Mahabaho. Sanjay informed King Dhritarashtra. So see where this episode is being narrated. What is happening on the battlefield is being told to the king who is in the palace. Like we are here. So we are also hearing. But is our mind in the battlefield? No. We are still not focusing. Any one of you who is in the battlefield of Kurukshetra? As it is, as it was being narrated to Dhritarashtra by Sanjay, same is being told to us. But see the distraction. We are still far away. We are somewhere else. We are self-absorbed. So Sanjay informed King Dhritarashtra very tactfully that his unwise policy of deceiving the sons of Pandu and endeavoring to enthrone his own sons on the seat of kingdom was not very laudable. So Prabhupada gives the philosophy. The signs already clearly indicated that the whole Kuru dynasty would be killed in the great battle. How? Just by blowing the conch shells. Beginning with the grandsire Bhishma down to the grandsons like Abhimanyu and others, including kings from many states of the world, all were present there and all were doomed. The whole catastrophe was due to King Dhritarashtra. The greatest villain of Mahabharata is not Duryodhana. He is Dhritarashtra. Why? Because he could not check his cruel son Duryodhana. So in our life also we are practicing Krishna consciousness. And if we do not follow the regulations, if we do not follow the principles, then there is no one else to be blamed. Our mind and senses is just like the sons of Dhritarashtra, who are wild and uncontrolled and irreligious. And again, they push us to perform a dharma. And if we do not check them or control them or regulate them, then we are the only cause of our downfall. So here Prabhupada is mentioning the whole catastrophe was due to the king Dhritarashtra. Dhritarashtra was blind. Why he was blind? Because he could not see the future. He did not have the spiritual vision. Similarly, everyone in Kali Yuga is bereft of spiritual vision. So he is a representative of Dhritarashtra. And he encouraged the policy followed by his sons. And we also encourage the policy followed by our mind and senses. They're very dangerous. So what we should follow? We should follow according to the prescription given in Shastra, in Bhagavad Gita. According to prescription given by the spiritual teachers, Guru, and by sages, which is Sadhu. So if we are not following Guru, Sadhu and Shastra, then there will be for sure catastrophe in our human form of life. So the blowing of the conch shells on the sides of the Pandavas, what was the effect? This is the 19th verse. Saghosho dharta rashtranam hidayani vridhariyat navasya prithivim cheva tumlo abhinunudanayat. So the blowing of these different conch shells became uproarious, vibrating both in the sky and in the earth. It shattered the hearts of the sons of Dhritarashtra. The sound was being created by both the parties. But here it is being mentioned that only the hearts of the sons of Dhritarashtra were shattered. Why? Because in their heart there was no space and no scope for Krishna. When Bhishma and others on the side of Duryodhana blew their respective conch shell, there was no heartbreaking on the parts of the Pandavas. Why? Because on the Pandavas side there was Krishna, and they had faith and firm belief in Krishna. Such occurrences are not mentioned, but in this particular verse it is mentioned that the hearts of the sons of the Dhritarashtra were shattered by the sounds vibrated by the Pandavas. This is due to the Pandavas and their confidence in Lord Krishna. One who takes shelter of Supreme Lord has nothing to fear. This is a very revolutionary statement. One who is actually a devotee, or one who is aspiring to be a devotee, who is taking shelter of Krishna, he is free of fear. If you see human existence in this material world is filled with fear. Can anyone say his heart is free of fear? There are no fears. We have so many fears. The heart is completely filled with fear. There are so many insecurity threats in our heart. Why? Because we do not have confidence in Krishna, or we are not following the message or the direction of Krishna. Even the most powerful person on this planet Earth, who is the most powerful person on this planet Earth? President of US, or maybe now the president of China. But you know what is the budget for their security? पता है आपको? अमेरिकी का जो राष्ट्रपति है, उसकी सुरक्षा, उसकी सिक्योरिटी के लिए कितना बजट होता है? कई कंट्रीज की जीडीपी निकल जाएगी. The more the power, the more he is insecure. You see Mr. Ambani in India, he is the richest person. How many security person work with him? What does it show? He is insecure. His life is always at threat. Some may kill him or not externally, but inside the fear is always killing him. Before he dies and he receives the funeral, he is dying every moment. Why? Because of the insecurity threat in his heart. So Prabhupada is saying here that one who takes shelter of the Supreme Lord, not otherwise. One who takes shelter of the Supreme Lord has nothing to fear, even in the midst of the greatest calamity. I'll give you one real story. Not story, a real episode. You know, Srila Prabhupada, he desired that all his disciples should preach to each and every corner of the world. Prithvi te ache yato nagaradi gram sarvatra prachar hoite morana. Because Prabhupada was very determined to see in his lifetime that the prophecy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu becomes true. So one of his disciples, Maharaj, he was preaching in Lebanon. Lebanon is, very orthodox Muslim country. And there is no other religion. There's only one religion. What is the religion? Is Islam. And in Islam, they are the followers of Quran. And in Quran, they have the understanding that the Supreme Lord has no form, or he is formless. And Maharaj was explaining that the Supreme Lord is a person. So one of the big leader there, he got to know of it. What he did, he sent his men to arrest Maharaj and bring him in front of him. So what can Maharaj do? The 1 or 2% in the midst of hundreds and thousands and millions. So he was dragged and he was brought before this Muslim leader. And he said, what are you trying to propagate? All nonsense, kafir, against the Islam. You are saying that the Lord has form. Now where is the form? Show me. And if you do not show me the form, I will shoot you. You call your Lord. Show me his form. Otherwise, this is the last day of your life. And there were hundreds of men with the firearm. All surrounded Maharaj. So Maharaj closed his eyes and he started chanting, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. And he really chanted with full concentration of the heart. And somehow the heart of that core fundamentalist fanatic changed. And he let Maharaj go without harming him anymore. And Maharaj was not fearful. Prabhupada is saying here, one who takes shelter of the Supreme. This is just few years back, some decades back. Not it is something in Prahlad Maharaj Yuga or Dhruv Maharaj Yuga. It just happened few years back. So many incidences happen, even in devotee's life. There is no fear. But only to those who are taking shelter. Fear means that there is absence of shelter. Very clear. If one is having any sign of fear in his heart, that means he is still not taking shelter. He is still not having confidence in Krishna. Where is his confidence? His confidence is in his own self, in his own abilities, in his own intelligence, in his own material relationships. So such a man will experience fear. And one who has taken shelter of Krishna, he is fearless. Amidst the most calamities, no fear. So bhakti brings one to experience life which is free of fear. Just imagine what will be the quality of life if there is no fear. How can one experience joy when the heart is filled with fear? That is why we have all artificial exhibition of joy and pleasure. Why? Because the heart is sinking. Every moment it is filled with fear. So how can one experience joy? To come to experience joy, one has to be free from fear. That is why all the so-called pleasure or leisure or happiness one is exhibiting is all artificial. Nothing there in the core of the heart. Core of the heart is filled with fear. We'll take one more verse and complete this section. This is the 20th verse. अथ व्यवस्थितान् दृष्ट्वा धार्तराष्ट्रान् कपिध्वजा प्रवर्ते शस्त्र सम्पाते धनुरुद्यं पाण्डव ऋषिकेशं तदा वाक्यम् इदम् आह महीपते. So at that time, when all the conch shells were being blown and the hearts of the Kauravas were being shattered, whereas the hearts of the Pandavas were filled with joy because of their confidence with Krishna. At that time, Arjuna, the son of Pandu, seated in the chariot, wearing the flag marked with Hanuman. So there is another sign of victory. The chariot is the Agnidev presented chariot, the chariot on which Krishna is there, and the chariot on which there is a flag, Kapi Dhwaja. Kapi means monkey, and Dhwaja means the flag. So on top of the chariot, there is a flag of the warriors, and that flag is Kapi Dhwaja, the special flag. On this flag, not only the symbol of the Kapi is there, the Kapi himself, the king of all Kapi, that is Hanuman, he is himself personally seated. Took up his bow. So there is another story, a long story. You want to hear the story? That once Arjuna was with Krishna and they were traveling and they went to one place on the shore of the sea and they saw Hanuman. And Hanuman was there, he was on the seashore. I don't remember the full instance, but I remember the crux of the message. So Arjuna, in a way, he tries to minimize Hanuman's effort in building the Ram Setu. He said, for a warrior like Lord Ram, where is the need for Setu? Where is the need to have the help of the monkeys to build the Setu? Because Rama is the best of the archers. When we will come into the 10th chapter, Krishna says amongst the archer, he does not say the best is Arjuna. The best is Lord Ram. So he said that the Lord Ram had so much of prowess. उनके पास इतनी शक्ति थी कि वो अपने arrows से, अपनी तीरों से bridge बना देते. And all the army could have easily moved. So where was the need of you monkeys to help Lord Ram? So Hanuman said that the bridge which would have been built by the arrow would not be able to take my weight. It would have collapsed. So Arjuna laughed and said, what are you speaking? How is it possible? He said, I can build a bridge which can connect from one shore of the sea to the other. And not only you, all your monkeys can come, stand on it and dance. And nothing will happen. So Hanumanji told him to go ahead. And Arjuna, in his flurry of his prowess and exhibition of his strength, he immediately created a bridge made up of his arrows. And as soon as Hanumanji touched the bridge, it collapsed and disappeared in the sea. So Arjuna was completely humiliated. Arjuna's pride was completely shattered. And Arjuna looked at Krishna because a devotee is always seeking shelter of the Lord. And in his heart, he prayed to Krishna that please save my grace. And when he remembered Krishna and he prayed to Krishna, thank you. Let's go on. Hare Krishna. Anyway, technology will continue to fail, but the message of Bhagavad Gita can never fail. Technology can never become a barrier. So Hanumanji gave him this blessing.
Prabhuji, you are muted. Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. You are muted.
Hanumanji gave him the blessing that whenever there will be a war, we will fight. Hanumanji, of course, is Trikali Yagya. He knows the past, he knows the future, of course, he knows the present. So he knew that this war will happen, and he gave him a blessing that whenever this war will happen, so I will be on your flag. And whenever there will be, in the wars, there used to be war cry. You know what is war cry? Like they say, Har Har Mahadev. So when the warriors used to cry, they used to shout. So that sound was being echoed by Hanumanji. So it would multiply millions of times. And that war cry would shatter the heart of the opposing side. So it is Kapi Dhwaja. So the flag of Arjuna, the chariot bearing the flag Arjuna marked with Hanuman. So Arjuna took up his bow and prepared to shoot with arrows. O king, after looking upon the sons of Dhritarashtra drawn in military array, Arjuna then spoke to the Lord these words. Let us see what Srila Prabhupada is speaking in the purport. That the battle was just about to begin because the conch shells have been blown. It is understood from the above statement that the sons of Dhritarashtra were more or less disheartened by the unexpected arrangement of military force by the Pandavas, who were guided by the direct instructions of Lord Krishna on the battlefield. So see, to the extent Krishna is controlling, that means Krishna is controlling our life. To the extent Krishna is controlling one's life, to that extent karma cannot act. Karma is not acting, one is on the transcendental platform. Karma is not acting, guna is not acting. Modes will not work. Only to the extent one is acting exclusively for Krishna's purpose. So the emblem of Hanuman on the flag of Arjuna is another sign of victory, because Hanuman cooperated with Lord Ram in the battle between Ram and Ravana, and Lord Ram emerged victorious. Now both Ram and Hanuman were present on the chariot of Arjuna to help him. So wherever there is Lord Ram, Hanuman is automatically there. And when there is Hanuman, there is no question of fear. What is Hanuman Chalisa saying? There is one chopai. Sankat mite, संकट कटे मिटे सब पीरा, जो सुमिरे हनुमत बलबीरा. So both Ram and Hanuman were present to help Arjuna. Lord Krishna is Ram himself, and wherever Lord Ram is, his eternal servitor Hanuman and his eternal consort Sita, the goddess of fortune, are present. So we are never alone. Never think that we have left all our relationship with the world and we have become lonely or alone. No. If we have Krishna on our side, everyone else is there. Hanuman is there, Sita Devi is there. Therefore, Arjuna had no cause to fear any enemies whatsoever. And above all, the Lord of the senses, Lord Krishna, was personally present to give him directions. Thus, all good counsel was available to Arjuna in the matter of executing the battle. So, similarly, all good counsel is available to us in the matter of executing the mission of human life, provided we accept. In such auspicious conditions, arranged by the Lord for his eternal devotee, lays the sign of assured victory. So this section reveals that who is a devotee, he is always assured of victory. He need not fear in whatever may be the difficult situation or circumstances. One should always have confidence in Krishna. And to the extent one is submitting and surrendering to Krishna, he will be held by Krishna. His mind and senses will be controlled by Krishna. And to the extent one is not devotee, one who is not submitting and surrendering to Krishna, he may have whatever. He may have the greatest of resources like Bhishma and Drona or Karna, or the colossal wealth of the kingdom of Hastinapur. He is sure to lose. So I'll stop here. It is 5 minutes to 9. If there are any questions from your side, we can take the discussion to a higher level, to next level. तो समझ में आ रहा है आप लोग को क्या संदेश मिल रहा है गीता से? What is the message that we are receiving? Bhagavad Gita is giving message to us, provided we accept. What is today's message? That we should try to be on Krishna's side. If we try to be on Krishna's side, then there is sure to have success. Success is assured. There is no question of any failure. And before success, we will be free from fear. Who does not want to live life which is free of fear? But is it possible for anyone to be free from fear? These are the signs of victory. The first chapter is doubt. In one word, you can remember the full one chapter. D is for Dhritarashtra and Duryodhana. Okay, Devadatta, बोलिए. Devadatta Dhananjaya.
हरे कृष्ण प्रभु जी.
Dhananjaya, you understand what is Dhananjaya?
जी प्रभु जी.
What is Dhananjaya?
मतलब मीनिंग वो अर्जुन का दूसरा नाम था.
नहीं. Prabhupada is explaining in today's purport. One who amasses great wealth, जिसके पास बहुत धन है, Dhananjaya, who has a great reservoir of wealth. That is Devadatta. Dhananjaya. What is the greatest wealth that we can have? Is the knowledge of Bhagavad Gita. There is no wealth which can be superior to the knowledge of Bhagavad Gita. Yes, go ahead.
हरे कृष्ण प्रभु जी, मेरा क्वेश्चन ये था कि मतलब अभी जैसे आपने फियर की बात किया, तो मतलब ऐसे कभी फियर आए तो उस टाइम पे हमको क्या करना चाहिए? मतलब कि लगता है ना ऐसे कि हाँ मतलब चीजें सही से नहीं चल रही है. आपने अभी जैसे लोनलीनेस की बात की कि नहीं सब अकेले हो गए एंड ऑल ऐसे होता है, तो उस टाइम पे कैसे मतलब अपने आप को कंट्रोल करें और अपने कॉन्शियसनेस को कैसे मोड़ें कि हाँ मतलब हमको उस टाइम पे कृष्णा की याद आए और वो चीज हम कर पाए.
देखिए, फियर क्यों है हमारे हाथ में? प्रभुपाद जी डायग्नोस कर रहे हैं. उसका कारण क्या है? क्योंकि हमारे हाथ में कृष्ण नहीं है. या कृष्ण का जो मिशन है वो नहीं है। हमारे हार्ट में क्या है? हमारे एम्बिशंस है, हमारे एस्पायरेशंस है, हमारे प्लान्स है। So how we can become free of fear, or when we are in a situation of fear, then we should try to connect with Krishna. To the extent we try to connect with Krishna, we can become free of fear. Very simple way of connecting to Krishna is that we can chant. We can chant Hare Krishna Mahamantra. I'll give you one practical episode which happened with one of Srila Prabhupada's disciples. So he was in the midst of fear. There were many hoodlums who had surrounded him and wanted to stab him and kill him. But he started to chant Hare Krishna. He was a Muslim person. Some other time I will explain because time is over. I won't explain this story. So if we really chant the Hare Krishna Mahamantra and hear the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, very soon the fear which is there in our heart will be abated. We will come to the transcendental platform and we will be free from that fear. We should chant. And how we should chant? We should chant in a way that we hear. We can hear the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. Then what did Arjuna do? Read Bhagavad Gita. Study Bhagavad Gita. Remember the message of Bhagavad Gita. Fear is only in the heart of those who are not fulfilling the mission of Krishna. So we should try to align our life in such a way that we become also an instrument to fulfill the mission of Krishna. Read Bhagavad Gita, chant Hare Krishna Mahamantra, pray to Lord Krishna. Immediately you will feel that the influence or the impact of fear will be much less. Is it possible for you to do that?
Yes, Prabhuji. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Very practical. But not only in the times of fear that we remember Krishna. That should not be the practice. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Okay, we'll end here. It is past 9. आपकी तरफ से कोई प्रश्न है? Any question from your side? बोलिए, if there is any doubt or any question, पूछ सकते हैं? नहीं है? From your side, any one of you? Yes, go ahead. A little louder so that they can also hear. कि भगवान ने उसको bewilderment, please try to understand, because Krishna is controlling. Because if bewilderment would not have come, then where was Arjuna would have started shooting arrows? How could Krishna speak Bhagavad Gita? The bewilderment was implanted in the heart of Arjuna by Krishna, because Arjuna is being completely controlled by Krishna. That is the purpose. Because Krishna wanted to give Bhagavad Gita. So his mind was bewildered. Okay, we'll stop here. Thank you very much. श्रीमद् भगवद गीता यथारूप की जय, श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय, उपस्थित सभी भक्तवृंद की जय।